thank you all for attending, panelist attendees, as you all kind of roll in. Today, we are going to be talking about a joint study and survey and the results that we ran with our partner, Everstage. And so the purpose of the discussion and really the study, I guess, that we ran was to look at the impact of the economic downturn on the software as a service industry, the SaaS industry. And so today I've got a group of panelists that is going to be kind of going through the results and kind of providing different perspectives and thoughts on things. And so first, let me do kind of around the horn. I'm going to do some quick introductions of us and of the various panelists that I have here. So first off, hello, everybody. I'm Matt Valm, the CEO and co-founder of RevOps Co-op. RevOps Co-op, we have 7,000 plus members from across the globe, 44 plus different countries represented. It is free to join RevOps Co-op, so if you are not a member already, you definitely should be. And we provide a lot of different programming to our members, like these events. We have a variety of education courses that we run, a Slack group, content that we create. So that's a little bit about us. I am also joined by Siva Rajamani, who is the CEO and co-founder of Everstage. Shiva was one of the first 5-10 members of the community, believe it or not. And so we've kind of been working together since the very early days. Everstage is one of the leading commission management tools and platforms out there. So if you haven't heard of them, you definitely should go and check them out. They've got a wide variety of customers, from early stage growing startups to late stage enterprise type companies, and a couple of G2 badges, as you can see there. I think 4.9 out of 5 stars on G2. So definitely check them out. I've also got Robert Gammon, who is the RevOps practice lead at Cortado Group. Cortado Group is a consultancy, works with a lot of different private equity groups and their portfolio companies on lots of different things, including go-to-market strategy and RevOps. And so excited to have Robert here as well. And then last but definitely not least, I have Camela Thompson, who is currently VP of Marketing at CaliberMind, and a dear friend, one who I refer to as the RevOps unicorn. I think she's been doing RevOps since before it was RevOps, marketing ops experience, sales ops experience, RevOps experience, and now leads marketing at a growing software company. So lots of different perspectives to provide. And so as we kind of jump into things, the first thing that I want to do is actually pull up the study and kind of walk through just a little bit about what we did and kind of how we, some of the results that we ended up seeing. So the first thing that I mentioned was, again, we kind of heard lots of things about this downturn, the impact on really every industry, every market that was out there, but specifically we wanted to know what's really happening in the SaaS industry, right? What are other software companies seeing? And so being in RevOps, we naturally love data, and we didn't want to kind of necessarily believe any of the qualitative stuff that we were hearing. So we went out, we wanted to collect some actual hard data to evaluate this particular impact on the SaaS industry. And so a couple of things that I want to point out initially. First, one of the main things that we saw was there was a drawdown across SaaS from, by 53%. And we did this survey in kind of Q3, Q4 of last year. So drawdown in SaaS, 53%. Compare that to the drawdown in the S&P 500 of 15%. Obviously, that number is bigger than what we saw across the broader market. Some other things to consider here: valuations were being reset really everywhere. Down rounds and layoffs, like we've all heard, are actually happening. And the other thing was, again, SaaS is not the only, I guess, market experiencing this, right? The economic downturn, whether it's a recession or not, is certainly, I think, here, and it is happening. And so, like I said, we kind of set out having some of this market data. We wanted to understand what were the things that were actually happening within SaaS. So we partnered with Everstage. We went out and we did a survey, collected information from 100 plus different software companies. We are going to share a link to download the report and obviously this recording with every attendee and registrant here. So don't worry, you will get access to all of that. And a couple of the key, I'll say, takeaways, and then I'll get into some of these insights that we saw, are one, definitely temper your expectations heading into 2023. Keep your reps focused and smarter budgeting. I think across all the questions, all the insights that we got, those are the things that we ultimately heard and the things that we ultimately saw. But first things first, one of the main questions we asked about was sales attainment, right? The folks that are out there selling, are they actually hitting their targets? Are they actually hitting quota? And I think the first thing that pops out here is about 67%, roughly 2/3 of the companies that we surveyed did not meet their attainment targets in the first half of last year. And the other thing, if I scroll to this slide here on pipeline challenges, was only about 1 of 5 companies were really able to kind of breeze through or hit their pipeline generation goals. And so if you look at, I guess, the leading and the lagging indicators there, it's like, all right, pipeline's getting a little harder to generate. Pipeline targets are, not where they should be, and business is not closing at the rate that we would necessarily expect. So, that can definitely be challenging. And I think the interesting thing here that I look at too, and I know, Camela, we've kind of talked about some of this stuff before, and I'll definitely want your perspective on this, is if you look at channel of kind of pipeline or where some of these pipeline challenges exist, I guess some of it's not surprising, like outbound was at the top. More folks maybe less willing to, take demos for new things that are solving maybe one particular use case. But the other thing was that paid ads were actually at the bottom. Now, the other thing I'll point out as I get to the end here is, paid ads are at the bottom in terms of, where challenges were being seen. Yet when we ask people, even on, might be getting ahead of myself a little bit here, but when we ask people about reduction in budgets, guess what the first place is that budgets are typically getting cut? Camela can raise her hand and be like, marketing. So what's interesting is that effectiveness across pipeline generation channels is kind of a little bit out of whack with, with what we're seeing in terms of where folks are actually making cuts. So before I go on and talk about kind of some more of the report and some more of the insights, I guess I'm curious whether it's, Siva, Robert, Camela, whoever wants to jump in here. Let's talk about sales attainment first, like folks actually hitting their numbers, whether it's your respective companies, Robert, portfolio companies that you're working with, friends that we have in the industry. Like, where does this sit with you all, in terms of kind of hitting targets? Does this sound right? Sound better than maybe what you thought? Like, where are things at?
Yeah, my first reaction to this is to go a bit more macro and look at the expansion of sales teams through H1 of 21, the sort of dried up candidate pool through the end of 21 and coming into 22. A lot of my customers had this sort of blown up sales force that was essentially under competent in how to truly maximize their pipeline, actually hit the attainment goals that were set for them. So we had this sort of blended mix of unattainable goals and then really junior team members that may or may not have been, even correctly selected for the roles, just because the sort of starvation of talent. And so, one of the things that I think, Shiva, I'm super interested to sort of volley that over to you is when you look at quota attainment, ramp time, poor ramp time, unrealistic goals, coming off of 2020, people are sort of shifting and moving. So I wouldn't say I'm shocked by this, but the sort of the even keel of 70 to 85, 85 to 90, that's it. There's an awful lot of people that were under 85%. So yeah, Shiva, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, Robert. And in fact, I would say, this obviously is data of H1. So, what we're seeing from our customers over H2 is, this is actually even further gone to the left in the sense that the weightage of folks who are actually not able to hit 100% in quota has actually gone up in terms of percentages on an average. So And that's obviously a reflection of, obviously, when we started the year, it wasn't, the way it ended in 2022, right? So, when quotas were set, it was, it was the anticipation of the 2021 boom, all of the optimism and just optimism at that, right? Like, we'll grow our pipe, we'll grow our markets by 2x and 3x and hire all that sales capacity, as Robert mentioned. So essentially, quotas were set in that zone. And then obviously H2 was when, obviously, the impact of slowdown really started to percolate in terms of whether it's sales cycle time, whether it's obviously, decisions being delayed or for that matter, postponed. So essentially, in our view, what we're seeing is this has actually gotten even worse in H2 in terms of quota attainment, because the reality of what it was set in 2022, early 2022 is not what we saw at the end of 2022.
I'd love to jump in if that's so those of us selling to marketing started feeling this really dramatically mid-year at the latest, and so we've had a little bit longer to marinate on what is going on. We're seeing a few things. First of all, what wasn't working well is working worse. So where there are existing inefficiencies, poor messaging, poor ICP targeting, all of that is felt much more painfully now. And this is a great time to go through and reassess your funnel, what's working, what isn't working, and people are uncomfortable enough to change. So it's actually kind of the people who will adapt and respond to this are going to do much better than the people who don't. I mean, that's just what we see every single time. But like I said, what wasn't working well is working worse. And then we're seeing a dramatic change in buyer behavior, not only because budgets are being cut, but because the people who are in positions of buying authority are changing. So first of all, the people lower down in the organization have lost buying power. So if your marketing team hasn't changed how they're thinking about their ICP and who they're targeting, it's time to do that. The second piece there is that many more millennials, less Gen X, less baby boomers are in positions of buying behavior. And if you look at the surveys out there, people are saying 43% of B2B buyers don't even want to talk to a salesperson.
Yep.
We need to rethink our approach to scale in B2B. Originally, it was, you want me to hit a number, give me more salespeople. The sales cycles are getting longer. More people are involved. More people want to research online. They want to start interacting with peer-based reviews. Like all of these things are speaking towards, we need to change the dynamic in sales and marketing, how well they work together and what we're investing in.
Camela, I love that. And I think I'm gonna play the resources card this call. I think how that impacts what we're seeing in that B2B buyer shifting and how we look at the kind of junior mentality of the rep explosion. A really good, solid foundational sales professional can pivot and move, and they can make those adaptations. And what you said about what didn't work is now working worse. The worst thing we can do is take that adequate sales knowledge away and maybe program the sales motions through an automated function incorrectly, right?
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Worst thing you can do is say like, oh, let's replace really good reps with super straightforward,
outbound automation, junior reps. That is a killer move right now in the worst way possible. I don't mean that in a positive way, because of all the changes.
Yeah.
I mean, because of all the changes in buyer behavior, but also since Ukraine and Russia, a lot of email regulations have been put in place because of all the cyber attacks. It's really limiting the ability to deliver outbound outreach. And a lot of messages are going straight to spam. Plus, we have people who are online all the time and really fatigued with cold outbound because their inboxes are flooded. So really looking at targeted prospecting that really nails in the message and people really get, that's just going to work better. It just is. So hiring the super junior, automating a sequence that isn't delivering. I see this happen over and over, and it's really hurting companies.
Yeah, I will double down on that for sure.
Yeah. And so I think a couple things on this, on the sales attainment, right? So one, sounds like, as Shiva said, like this hasn't gotten better. This has gotten worse. As Camela said, the things that weren't working before are now working worse. And so, while it may sound obvious, it's like, don't do the things that aren't working. Stop doing the things that aren't working and listen to what the data tells you, right? So again, going back to the things that Campbell mentioned, like don't throw more reps at the problem, and don't assume that you can automate your way out of this. And I actually think the sales attainment piece here and the pipeline challenges, they're tied together a little bit in what you mentioned, Camela. And I think, some of the things that we in RevOps and just as, call it SaaS companies can do are one, reduce the I'll say the number of, maybe people or ineffective, call it reps, sequences, things that we're doing on the sales side that aren't producing results. But two, focus on giving the salespeople that we have higher quality, higher intent leads to ultimately work, right? And I think you brought up some data points about who the buyer is. I think we should consider that as like, we're not just trying to sell to, say, a marketer, or we're not just trying to sell to like a RevOps person, but who is that person? Are they 27 years old? Are they, actually getting a lot of their information off of social media? Do they even want to talk to a person, or do they expect to be able to go to the website and try your product? Like maybe those are the things as revenue operators that we should be doing to support our businesses is, hey, if we don't have a product led or like a self-serve sort of motion today, how can we get there, right? In some way, shape, or form, right? Do we need a product walkthrough on our website, right? Can we deliver some sort of free trial experience? If we don't have a free version of our product, how do we get there? Again, those are all things that, kind of are in line with what the data says here as well, which is like, hey, outbound isn't working. Email boxes are getting flooded. Things are going to spam. Well, what is working? Paid ads, for example, are, the least impacted here. Why is that? People are searching for things online, right? Or partnerships, right? People are going to communities, right? Other areas to learn. I think those are some of the takeaways as I hear you all talking about, things that we can actually do to support our companies here based on, again, what this data is telling us.
And that's exactly, we started gaining leads, we addressed our messaging, and I'm investing in sales enablement.
Yep.
I was just going to make the enablement, pull that enablement flag down, the pivot, the need to have that sort of baseline expertise that you can move and quickly enable reps to change and move their behaviors. That enablement is a no-brainer when I look at this data.
Yeah. And actually, so, one of the other things that I wanted to get to was, sales cycle length is getting longer. I know I've experienced this, this personally, and I think, Camela, you mentioned it too, in terms of some lower level titles, maybe within companies previously having buying authority that now do not, right? So I guess I'm curious from the three of you, what are some other, call it reasons, things that might be impacting kind of sales cycle length? And, again, for me, go back to the sales enablement piece, but, outside of that, or maybe inside sales enablement, what are some specifics there that revenue operators can do, help support their companies with? But outside of enablement, what are some other things that could have a real impact on sales cycle that maybe folks aren't considering?
I think one of the sorry,
go ahead, Shiva. The authority and budget understanding and qualification is pivoting as everybody's FP&A teams struggle to reforecast, approve line item by line item on the budget. The motions of how you qualify that sort of ready to buy behavior, those if you're in tune with the buying team at earlier on, you're going to understand and assess where there's going to be an extension to the sales cycle. I feel that the closer you are to the finance team, especially given that there's a lot of people who are just strictly saying no to anything new in lieu of a new forecast coming out for them to be able to spend. So, fully understanding that buying decision team and properly equating your forecast categories, right? Like your sales cycle times are going to go down, or going to go down if you're, unqualifying opportunities early enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
But holding on to the opportunity without knowing, the real confidence in its ability to close. I think there's a lot of, I would be willing to bet there's a lot of opportunities out there that are waiting for a budget update is my on hold status. And the fact that we just didn't know, we didn't have a deep enough understanding of their budget authority earlier on in the opportunity was probably to add to that.
Yeah. So discovery up front, quality and qualification up front, some good things. Siva, what were you going to mention?
So I was getting to the point that as Camela mentioned, it's not just about the folks who are slightly junior who had a budget or the authority to take decisions before kind of now getting off the table in terms of buying behavior, but also just multiple decision makers coming into this whole cycle, right? So essentially, and as Robert mentioned, finance as a function is kind of now snooped into every conversation. Doesn't matter what kind of tool you're buying at the end of the day. So clearly, more decision makers, and also the increased need to validate ROI in a way that finance can understand, because obviously finance understands ROI in a certain way.
Yes.
It may not be the same way as a functional leader understands. So, to be able to articulate it in that way is one important sales enablement to do. And obviously, going back to the basics of really ensuring that you're able to multi-thread the conversation. Your champion in your function might not be the only person that you are okay to, it's okay to influence. You need to be able to have other threads going in and have possibly potential champions who could, get you through into conversations is something super important as we get through into 2023.
I would love to give people a couple tactical, practical things that they can do right now to add a ton of value to their companies. One, start looking at lead conversion analysis, figuring out what profiles convert better and what sources, and make recommendations on how to improve your MQL gating or your lead conversion numbers. The second one is to look at sales conversion across all of the stages and identify the people who just kick butt at certain stages. Figure out what they're doing differently. Are they really good at securing the first call? Are they really great at getting the second meeting? Are they really great at closing after the demo? Identify the people who are just knocking it out of the park and point those out to the business and say, these are the people we need to go figure out what they're doing so we can replicate it across the rest of the team. Because everybody's good at something different. If we can figure out where there's gaps and train people up, RevOps is just providing a ton of value to the organization by doing those two things.
Yeah. And so I think I'll say this sounds easier than it probably is, but I think do the two things that Camela just mentioned, which are look at your end-to-end funnel and look at it by lead source, however you want to define that, right? And by person. And if you do those two things, I will almost 100% guarantee you that you will find results that Camela just mentioned, which are certain people are going to be better at certain like stage to stage conversions than others. And you will immediately see that certain channels are performing better than others as well. And then look at that and go and figure out why, right? Why is person A doing better than person B at this stage and not at this other stage? Why is channel X doing better than channel Y? And if you start to dive into that, you can figure out, again, how do we replicate those things maybe across the other team? Goes back to the sales enablement conversation we were just having. Or you can figure out, hey, you know what? This channel we're investing in over here is our worst performing channel. Let's not do that anymore because, again, as Camela said, things that aren't doing well are only going to do worse. Stop investing there. Put those dollars towards something that is actually working. And again, I say it sounds easier than it actually is because as probably everyone on this call can attest to, CRM and systems configuration and setup is going to be how you make sure you're capturing the data to do that. But again, that's why you're in RevOps. That's why you're a revenue operator, is to make sure you can collect the data. You've got it set up in a way that makes sense. Robert, it looks like maybe I triggered you on something there.
Oh,
I don't
you
know
totally
if that's good
did.
or bad.
Oh no, it's a good thing, Camela. I love that idea of like, what can you do today? And I think if I were to implore every one of the revenue operations leads that gets advice from either the community or just looking at this and looking at their intuition, is if you are not currently distributing statistics about your sales cycle in a open format of help me understand what these things mean, gating the cross the aisle marketing to sales conversation on these statistics. This is what it is. If you're not openly sharing that, you should be. And there's 1,000,005 ways to do that, but essentially you need to strike that chord of getting across departments to agree that there's this lever or this other lever is what needs to be moved. But yeah, I think I love that idea of start right now prosecuting that or interrogating your pipeline, right? Really start to share those data points, be loud about it.
Yeah. Yep. So we've chatted about, I'll say, call it kind of top of funnel pipeline generation and, closing new business sales. I think one of the other things that we kind of surveyed folks on is, how are they doing with current customers, right? Are folks seeing churn stay the same, increase in churn? Are people looking to get out of contracts? Kind of what's happening there? And I guess the high level that we saw is that churn's going up. And again, I think Siva, you can probably say too, the same thing we saw with attainment is probably true here in terms of the churn that folks are seeing has not gotten better since maybe the first half of the year. It's only gotten worse. And so I guess same question for the panelists here is like, one, what are you seeing? Does this feel right? What's your experience here? But then I guess like two, the first thing that pops up when I look at this data is CS ops, or basically the CX ops portion of the RevOps role, or like, what are the things that you can do post sale for again, to support your customer success team to drive earlier renewals, lengthen contract terms, whatever that might be. But then also flip that on the head. And obviously within RevOps, you own a really large tech stack typically. So what are some of the things that you can do from maybe your own budget perspective to, again, consolidate software, ask your vendors if they can go into, longer term agreements, if you might be able to get some gives, if you provide some gets, right? Like, what are some of those things that you can do on both ends of that spectrum? So maybe Siva, kind of if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, no. Before we jump into the specifics of how to approach this, I think the first thing I wanted to mention is just the impact of the churn itself, right? Like, so this is completely off the charts, because if you see 44% saying about 10% increase in baseline churn, 36% saying 11 to 20% means if you're talking about 10 to 15% on an average increase in churn, that's significant impact on your revenue growth. And for a mature company, this really can kill the company. And so I think I just want to first point out that the impact is much more than what we talked about, even just the sales cycle or any of the other things that we talked about. The impact of churn is the one thing that could potentially derail the company more than any of the other ones that we discussed. So having said that, as you pointed out, Matt, I think from a customer success standpoint, clearly things that we are seeing our customers doing and increasingly doing is, trying to see how you can enable, multi-year, renewal contracts if they're not there already. Essentially, with some of those SMB companies, how do you push the monthly renewals where there's higher churn to more of those annual contracts with discounting, and also essentially ensuring that your CS and your account managers are potentially incentivized to be able to do those, right? So to clearly set up those as part of their incentive programs as well, to make sure they're going after, because at the end of the day, if you think about it, obviously the most common thing that most companies do is to, provide a discount to be able to get a longer lock-in. But when you do a discount, the ARR comes down, and most reps CS are compensated on ARR. So you need to now solve for that, potential shortfall in how their quota attainments are going to be. So it's an important thing to be able to align, because otherwise you have the company goal to want to get, longer term contracts, but at the end of the day, your reps might not be incentivized to actually do that.
Yep. Camela?
Yeah, I wanted to call out a couple things that are happening. So remember the big reshuffle, the big reassignment, everybody moving around companies. The likelihood of the people who purchased your product initially still being in that company is actually really low. So people need to take a proactive approach to connecting with stakeholders, reselling the product, and speaking to the value of the product. So one of the largest opportunities I see there is if people have Gong, they have call analysis, they can start looking for keywords, start doing that research. If you don't have that, that's okay. What I would really recommend you do is connect your marketing and customer success departments to start having dialogue about, I had this great quote from a marketer I had on my podcast about people don't buy the product for the reasons you think they do. They have their own reasons. Figure out what those reasons are so that feeds into both your marketing and what your customer success team is proactively surfacing to your customers to give them an additional value. So I think people need to be really proactive in addition to seeking yearly versus monthly, multi-year agreements. In addition to that, they need to be proactive about reselling the product. And I think that Revenue Ops has a great opportunity here to start really digging into where they're seeing patterns in churn, like what kind of profiles are the companies? Have they seen turnover? Are your contacts in Salesforce, are they all listed as inactive now because they're no longer with the company? Are there some patterns that we could start raising to the business to get them more proactive about reselling that product?
Yeah. And this is where, so I guess again, a couple of things that I think, RevOps folks can do today or start to do. Kind of ties back to some of the stuff we were talking about before, right? If you're able to look at, your funnel from top to bottom by person, or say by channel, by source, carry that data through all the way to churn, right? Because again, some of the things you might realize is maybe there's a particular marketing channel that, Camela mentioned the profiles of customers that are churning. Maybe a lot of them are coming from one particular marketing channel, or possibly like one rep or one team is maybe getting folks over the finish line, but maybe they're churning very quickly. Those are all things that that you can learn. Maybe there's certain company characteristics, right? Once you start to bucket, folks in churn, you realize, hey, a lot of people in this particular segment are not getting activated, not using our product. That can help you identify where to look. And then the last thing I guess that resonated was, Siva, you mentioned, properly, incentivizing the team, right? If you take a hit on, something like ARR from that particular customer, but you decrease, call it the risk of churn going forward, that's obviously going to contribute to overall, hopefully, revenue growth over the long run. But, maybe in the short run, you take a hit. Just know that, that's a happy trade-off for folks to make. And you certainly don't want to disincentivize people from doing that. So, Robert, did you have anything to add on the churn aspect too, given kind of some of the PE and portfolio companies that you work with?
Yeah, I have a ton, but I can keep it nice and high level. The profiling and sort of persona carry through from all the way from marketing to customer success is where RevOps really kind of stands to shine, of what profile customers churning. Not only where do they come from, is this the same profile or persona that we're having a problem converting at the very beginning of the funnel? Are there commonalities all the way through from the customer's profile themselves? And then obviously the stakeholder management and sort of adoption analytics, understanding that remarketing. Camela, I think that's such a fantastic call out of engaging that persona if we know one's at risk. Being able to have sort of a unified view of your of the profile of your buyer if you don't have that, you need to have that. You need to be able to corroborate a churned customer with the same kind of profile as who your marketing team is targeting, so that you can sort of tell that story. 50% increasing in churn, I'd be interested to see how that stacks with the failure to growth. The same companies are we seeing the compression of growth, and at the same time they're also seeing churn, or is it weighted one way or the other? I think that would be another area to look of, are we telling the same story from our personas at the beginning and the top of the funnel?
Yeah, and I think last thing I'll mention here again for folks in RevOps is like the sales to CS, and then the post sales process operations, right? Like focus time and energy there. For example, like Camela mentioned, if your CS team or whoever is going to be responsible for basically reselling that account on why they should buy your product again, guess what? I mean, it sounds obvious. They should probably have access to information on why they bought that product in the first place, right? So make sure that the sales to customer success connection is there, that systems are connected in a way that aligns with kind of process operations, and that those two teams are able to kind of work hand in hand, because that's going to allow you to, again, drive results, ultimately combat some of the churn that we're seeing. All right, so we've got time check 10-15 minutes left, so a couple other things that I wanted to get to here. So first off, reduction in budgets. I think to go with the theme and maybe sound a bit like a broken record, I think this is probably also increased in terms of nearly 2/3 of companies experiencing budget cuts. I think this is now probably gone up. And in terms of functions that face budget cuts, it looks like again, majority both marketing and software cuts. I brought this up earlier, and Camela, I guess I'm kind of curious on your perspective, because one, you're in marketing, and two, you're selling a product to marketers. Is what kind of, call it, rings true, or some of the things that you're seeing on the budget reduction aspect? And then, like I mentioned, again, how can folks do things differently? I know we've talked about in previous conversations, don't necessarily eliminate your paid advertising, right, or the channels where other folks might be easily cutting. But again, I'm curious, like, how does this ring true with you, and what are some of those things that, as a marketer, as a MOPS person, as someone selling to marketers, what are some things that folks can do?
Oh gosh. So does it ring true? Absolutely. Every time, I've been through many downturns because I'm old enough to have lived through many of them, but every time, especially in B2B, our first reaction is to see where we can cut back on software, and then it's cut the marketing budget. And a lot of companies slash advertising first, so paid advertising. And what the research shows us is that the people who can get their arms around the data and understand which campaigns are working and continue to invest in that will grab more market share now, while other people are backing down, and they're going to come out on top after that. So research shows us that it's actually a good thing to continue investing if you have the data infrastructure in place to be able to navigate what's working and what isn't, and a team that can help serve those insights to marketers who may not be as comfortable with data. So in revenue operations, the biggest gift you can give to your business is helping your marketing leaders become more data literate and comfortable speaking to what their data is saying and defending it. So in marketing land, we've got data is fractured across a bunch of systems. It's hard to get our arms around. And that's one of the areas we lose credibility on the C-suite and boardroom first, is whether or not we're reporting our data in a way that makes sense to the rest of the business. So proactively meeting with them, discussing the different terminology that's being used, how those things are defined, the limitations in their data, how they can speak intelligently about what they can and can't do, and why they need to do it anyway. Those are all gifts you can give your marketing team. Now is actually, even though we're seeing these software cuts are happening, now is a fantastic time to invest in analytics because we need data to make better decisions and invest in marketing in a very intelligent way. So that's my soapbox. Those are my feelings. But I think revenue operations has a really tremendous opportunity here to get closer in with their marketing leaders and support them when it comes to speaking to ROI on their investments and how they can best represent what they've done and understand where they need to change and what's not working.
Yeah, like again, kind of goes back to some of the stuff we mentioned before, looking at things by channel, by person. Like, one, understand that not everything is going to work, and also not everything that we do is supposed to work, right? So let's learn about the things that aren't working, right, and let's stop investing there, right? Help your marketing team, help your CS team, your CS leader understand that stuff too, and double down and focus on the things that are working.
One nuance I will point out, though, is don't use one metric with marketing to gauge whether or not the tactic's working. So any marketer will tell you, I do some things for awareness, I do some things for lead gen, and I do some things to keep the pipeline moving through the funnel. We need multiple ways to look at it. We can't just say what gave us MQLs, stop doing all the other stuff, because there are times when we need to do the other stuff.
Yep. Yeah, agreed. And actually, we did get one question in. It's kind of tied to this reduction in budget and the churn issue that we were talking about. Is someone was asking whether or not we have insights on this increase in churn being driven by budget or application rationalization decisions versus a dissatisfaction with product or services. And we don't have, at least Shiva, I don't think we have data on necessarily like churn reasons, but I think we can all speak to at least our own maybe opinions or hypothesis on that. And I guess I would say, I think the answer is probably a little bit of both. Meaning, like, even internally, as we look at our own tech stack, is like, hey, we've got a bunch of different tools doing a bunch of different things, right? Like, do we, I don't know, not to throw any product under the bus, but I was like, do we need Calendly, like, across our entire team? Or can we get the calendar functionality we need from HubSpot or some other tool that we're currently using? Same thing with like, outbound automation tools and, a bunch of other things. I was like, hey, what are we actually getting from this particular product? And can it be done from something that is a true, like, mission critical, like CRM level, like product? And I think a little bit like the first things you naturally kind of look at are tools that you may not be necessarily satisfied with, is like the first place you go to kind of cut. So that's my perspective, but I'd be curious to hear, like, Robert, Camela, Shiva, like what you all think, and what your own opinions are there.
Well, if I separate mission critical from non-mission critical applications, I think that there's a story to be told there. But I think, Matt, one of the bigger stories is that return on investment Camela was talking about, that you're conveying it over to the buyer, and then continuing that sort of adoption investment that they've made in your solution is all the more of a focus with how CS is viewing the account. I think dissatisfaction is largely rooted in a failure to see the return on investment, and I think that failure to see the return on investment starts with the sales process, the actual content that the buyer saw within marketing, and it results in, I thought it was going to do this, but it doesn't, and now I don't need it. So yeah, I think the push there to really understand that that marketable return on investment is even more important, to convey back through marketing. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, Shiva?
Yeah, one quick point I wanted to make was, when Robert was mentioning, and Matt, you were mentioning about dissatisfaction as well, and the return on investment on products. I think one thing that also has changed is how companies perceive value, right? When it was everything about growth, the perception of value was slightly different. from when you wanted to be a lot more closer and sustained growth, then what you perceive as value, you start to question different things vis-a-vis what you questioned before. So I think there's also a change in what your perception of value is, and therefore there's some impact on some of the dissatisfaction that you see in products.
Yeah, 100%. And one thing I'll mention, Camela, before getting your opinion is, you see this item here of, like budget cut, I'll say like reasons, right? Purchasing only mission critical software. Go and ask anyone what their definition of mission critical is. And you ask 100 people, I bet you'll get 100 different answers. And it goes back to the things that Camela and Robert mentioned earlier, is like, understand why this thing can or cannot be mission critical to the person who you're selling to, right? Because you can, if you do your discovery right, if you qualify things up front, you can help define mission critical for them, or you can realize what is mission critical for them and how do I relate my product to tie into that, right? So I think that's one of those things where call it sellers, marketers, we can help kind of influence, drive, again, what is mission critical. But Camela, I'll turn it over to you.
No, I mean, it's spot on. It's what I struggle with as a marketer every day, is figuring out how to convince people that what we sell is mission critical and not just a nice to have. That's what we have to do on a daily basis. And it's tough. At CaliberMind, we connect all of the systems, clean the data, and then analyze it. And the value really is in the cleaning of the data. But I'm working with a population of folks that don't always value that because they're not comfortable with data. And if they can do something in Salesforce that's close enough, it's good enough. So I feel this.
Yeah.
So the thing is, if you're not doing opportunity close interviews as a business, that's a huge opportunity to figure out how to pivot from a nice to have to a need to have and identify the gaps that your company is experiencing. So for example, we did this a while back and found out that people were going with another tool because they thought we didn't do web analytics and web monitoring, and we actually did. So we made a simple change on the website and that fixed the objection. My point is, don't just rely on quantitative data. Encourage your company to gather qualitative feedback from your customers, whether that's the VP of CS running lost renewal interviews, or if it's lost opportunity reviews with your prospects.
Yeah. So whether it again, it can be CRM or call it conversational intelligence data that you have. You mentioned if you've got Gong, Avoma, whatever tool, right? If you're just recording stuff in Zoom, leverage the conversational data that you might have to understand where those objections are popping up, why people are saying no. And even if you don't have that, or if you do have that, but in addition to, right, leverage the closed loss opportunity data that you have within your CRM to determine what adjustments you can possibly make, or again, where you're starting to see themes and maybe some patterns that, again, going back to the profile data that we were talking about across your customers, that's another one that you can look at across your opportunities to determine where you might be able to make changes that could have an impact.
Yeah, and we've even started doing what we call game tape review, and what I'm doing is I'm going through all of our calls with the sales team and taking the parts where the customer's conveying what they want to solve. And we're reviewing that and talking about product fit and how we navigate this as a team. That's a great opportunity, whether it's CS, sales, whoever, they really get engaged with this game tape. So I'm giving you a freebie. Go tell your marketing and sales team to do that. It's going to be great.
Yeah. Well, and I think that kind of, as we kind of get wrapped up in the next couple of minutes here, I guess that's the last thing I'll mention before I ask y'all for some closing thoughts is, a lot of these things that we mentioned today of look at your funnel end to end, slice and dice the data by channel, by person, do, close loss, opportunity reviews, look at Gong, look at your call recording, game tape reviews. If these are things that maybe you're not doing today, one, you should definitely start. But two, you can't necessarily just do them I'll say willy-nilly, right? Like build them into your process. If you have a one-on-one with your marketing leader, your sales leader, your revenue leader, right? Like start to build these things into that conversation, have a running agenda where this is always on the list. If you want to make a case for the game tape review, if you're not doing something like that today, like formalize it, right? Because as we all know, if it's not on your calendar, if it's not in your operating cadence, your operating rhythm, if you don't document it, it's not going to get done. So don't rely on these things to be kind of ad hoc as they come up. Like if you're not doing them today, build them into your process so that they just become habit. And then the next time that things turn around, don't turn around, right? Like, nothing new, like you're, kind of old hat stuff that we're talking about. So let's see. So as we wrap up, we got 5-6 minutes left. I guess the road ahead, right? We talked a bunch about the data, what it said, some of the things that we've learned. I guess Shiva, curious to hear from you. Running a growing software, startup now, I think 100 plus, 150 plus people. What are some things that you're looking at in 2023 that could help our audience listening today?
I think one thing I'd add here is, before I started Everstage, I was a revenue operations professional myself. And, looking back at the last 3 years, I was just mentioning this before the conversation, right from 2020, it's been super hard on revenue operations professionals, honestly, to really plan your year, right? 2020 was out of whack, and then 2021 was okay, 2022 again, and now 2023. You really can't plan, and so therefore, the biggest advice that I have is really be able to, create multiple different scenarios as you're planning through your year. Think about everything, right? From your revenue goals to quotas to, how you structure your capacity, your pipeline, your investments, and really be open to flexibility, because the way we start the year, we don't know how we're going to end the year. And I think so that's probably my biggest, advice that I'd give RevOps professionals, and also something that, we're practicing ourselves, because, we have to be flexible to see what happens in Q2, Q3, and then, accordingly make changes to our plan as needed.
Yeah. All right, Camela, I'm going to ask you next, and I'll throw in, we got kind of one last question that I thought you might be able to talk about too, as you talk about other things to focus on for this year, is what KPIs are you following to optimize demand generation for inbound marketing? And this person said they've looked at some of their data, but they've realized that their customer journey to become an MQL is not necessarily 100% tracked. So, what are some things that you might be able to do to optimize demand gen on the inbound marketing side when you may not have, great reliable data on the complete customer journey? And then also separate from that, what else are you looking at this year?
So check out CaliberMind. Jokingly, not jokingly. No, but seriously, from a practical standpoint, it doesn't need to be perfect to be useful. And don't wait for perfection to start analyzing it. So use what you can, make a plan to improve what you don't have, but chances are really, really good if you have a funnel at all in place in your CRM that you can start making optimizations plays for lead gen specifically. You may not be able to impact awareness and later funnel plays, but at least lead gen. So start there. And just, you can message me, but really keep in the context of what you're measuring. So if we're just able to look at lead gen stats, that's all we're able to judge these campaigns on, and that's all we're able to optimize. That's still something. So don't not do it, but make sure you keep the context. The other thing, I'd like to echo the advice that's already been given, flexible mindset. So look at this as an opportunity to challenge yourself and grow. This is going to be so uncomfortable for a lot of us as we go through a lot of tough changes. But if we can look at this from the perspective of, I am learning a ton right now, and I'm going to carry this wherever I go. What can I look at today that can change what we're doing tomorrow for us to get better? So if you haven't checked out the book Mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck, totally recommend it. But it's all about viewing this as an opportunity and not letting yourself burn out. Keep good boundaries, take your weekends, unplug and rest, because you're only going to make more mistakes if you're going 24/7.
Yep. And I like the, I always say, as I'm sure Shiva can attest to as well, it's all about the journey, not the finite outcome at the end, right? So like you said, regardless of the outcome of anything, like approach every day. And if you learn something new by the end of that day, right, it might be you learned a lot of stuff that didn't work. That's great. Don't do it again tomorrow. And, tomorrow you might learn something that does work. So Robert, we'll turn over to you for some closing remarks here before we wrap up.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with everything you guys have said. I think the agility and the speed in which you can take an insight and apply it to the business and the practice that's being put in place, that's exactly what we do as revenue operators, is sort of harmonize all the levers that are required to sort of make a sale happen and keep a customer happy, and just being aware. And Camela, you just said the most amazing one. Just try something, right? The scientific method: have a hypothesis, break it, fix it, try again, and there's no excuse for not trying. So try to make those assumptions, make an assumption, try to prove it out, prove it right, prove it wrong, but nonetheless continue to try to get smarter and make your business smarter. So
yeah.
I just feel like you just gave the definition that separates really good RevOps professionals from the excellent ones who are on their way to executive career tracks, is that it's just a mindset really that separates everybody.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. Bias for action. I'm all about it. All right, y'all. Well, we are at time. So first, I want to thank Shiva, Robert, Camela. Thank you all very much. I love you all. Appreciate you providing your thoughts, expertise, opinions, everything here. To all the attendees out there, thank you very much as well. Just so you know, we will be editing this video, doing the whole recording thing, and sharing a link to download the actual report so you can read through it all on your own. So you'll hear from us and the folks at Everstage after this. And until then, I will let you all run. So wherever you are in the world, have a good rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening, and we will see you all on the flip side.